Not from my generation. Thank you. No. Okay, where are we? We are, good morning, Richard. 9:29. We'll just,
Morning.
9:30. Here we are. We're at 9:30. Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 1, 2, and 3 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments prior to their consideration by City Council on October 14th, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. If anybody has any motions that they want to move that they haven't shared with us, appreciate you doing so as quickly as possible so that the delegations, the applicant, and all of us have a chance to review it. So, any declarations of interest? I'm seeing everybody shaking their heads. What's wrong? I've got a new setup today, everybody, so I'm not going to be able to see the, hang on, see the waving of hands. It's the first time I'm using my desktop screen. Anyway, so Melanie, I guess you're going to have, Melody, you're going to have to tell me that, okay, unless I can figure it out. Okay, so no declarations of interest. Confirmation of the minutes from our September 24th, 2020 meeting.
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Communications, we have a response to inquiries on the rezoning and development charges. Okay, okay. We have 2 additional walk-ons that Vice Chair Gower has got motions for. Let's deal with those right now as far as getting them on or not onto the agenda. The first one has to do, it's quite technical, and it's getting us ready for the vote at council on next Wednesday on infill in R4. Vice Chair Gower?
Yep, I'll wait to see it on screen there. All right, whereas the implementing zoning bylaws for the residential infill and the phase 2 of the R4 zoning review are to be before council at its next meeting on October 14th, 2020, and whereas technical amendments are necessary for the proper implementation of such bylaws, therefore be it resolved that the following motion be added to the agenda of the Planning Committee meeting of October 8th, 2020, pursuant to the procedure bylaw subsection 89.3.
Okay, is that carried? Anybody have any questions? Is that carried for Mr. Wise?
Carried.
Great.
Good, thank you. And then the second item to add is an information item. Vice Chair Gower?
This is on Bill 197. So whereas at its August 27, 2020 meeting, the Planning Committee received an information report titled Briefing on Planning and Development Charges Aspects of Bill 197, COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act 2020, and whereas staff committed to provide a briefing to committee at such time as further information was available on the pending legislation, and whereas relevant provisions came into force on September 18th, 2020, therefore be it resolved that the Planning Committee approved that the following item be added to the agenda for consideration at its meeting today pursuant to section 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, briefing on planning and development charges aspects of Bill 197, COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act 2020.
Perfect, and we'll deal with both of these when we get to other business. So on the Bill 197 motion to add it to the agenda, is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Okay, the first item up is zoning bylaw amendment 1131 and 1151 Tarrant Road. It's in Canada North and Councillor Sudd's ward, and we do have Neil Thompson is here to speak, so we're going to hold that item. Second item is the zoning bylaw amendment, part of 3640 Greenbank Road. Michelle Taggart is here to speak, and I've asked her to speak because we had late arriving information or input from the school board, the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, with regard to it. So I asked her to speak for clarification. And also, is Lily on with us today? Lily Chu?
She is.
I'm here.
Okay, Lily. So just in case there's any questions, thank you for joining us. We're going to hold that item. Next up is the zoning bylaw amendment to permit reduced parking rates for large-scale warehouse and industrial buildings. We have no speakers on that. Is that carried?
Carried.
Great, thank you. The next one is motions of which notice has previously been given, which we'll just deal with this anyways because it was formally before us. And this has to do with the Centertown community design plan and the secondary plan and what we agreed to there. I think it was introduced, the notice of motion by Councillor Leeper on behalf of Councillor McKenney. I don't have anybody that wants to speak unless necessary. If necessary, we have Timothy Bede and Paul Black from FOTAN. Does anybody have any questions for them? Remember, I'm not seeing the hand, Melody, so
Nothing.
stop me. I'm gonna have to
Nothing.
figure out before the next meeting how that works on this thing. Okay, so Timothy and Paul, if you're there, are you okay if we're prepared to carry this? Are you prepared not to speak? Are you okay not speaking?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you,
That's
Madam Chair.
correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, so carried.
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 Thank you. And then we get into our other business. So let's go back to Tarrant Road, first item. And Neil Thompson, I know that you're there. Hello, good morning. Neil is the president of the Canada Beaver Brook Community Association. Neil, floor is yours, 5 minutes.
Okay, I apologize for a couple of minutes delay there. It sort of kicked me out, pulled me back in again. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
Okay. Comments, I think there was a quick slide that
Coming up now.
putting up here. Just want to speak to some of the points on this. Give me a second here. The KBCA and community have been through various development applications with the guidance of our planner, Dennis Jacobs, particularly around the 2013 official plan. Myself and Gary Seeley were on the citizens panel for the 2013 official plan review, so we're quite familiar with the process. So on that basis, we're going to say, we understand the process, we understand the current official plan, and based on that and the arguments put forward by staff, we have no formal objection to this. However, as one of the few places outside the Greenbelt that has been subject to intensification without a community design plan or secondary plan, but with certainly a large emphasis on proximity to a future transit node, I believe that the planning committee should understand some of the ramifications and impacts and the results of those, because we believe that this particular project has a risk of at least partially failing. We believe this development is at risk due to an overestimate for this type of residential unit, including an over-reliance on the desirability of renting at this location based on nearby access to future downtown transit. One of the key things that we have always known in Canada is that 70% of the people who work here live here. Only 7% pre-COVID work downtown. So the overwhelming need for transit is in community, not to get to and from downtown. Now, having said that, we also know that there's an increasing number of people who are transiting out to the Canada North Business Park. So, transit from downtown to Canada is certainly a priority. I'd like to point out a couple of partial failures that we've seen here. One was that there's a series of apartments put in what is the former Canada Town Center, most notably Williams Court, 6 multiple mid-rise to high-rise apartment buildings, were all predicated on the basis of the town center, which was supposed to be a wholesale live, work, play community center, high density. That was always Bill Tarrant's plan. And that was going to include office-related businesses, Main Street kind of retail and restaurant and everything else. Well, the net result with the delay of the LRT is that the only thing that's been built there are the apartment buildings. And I know from our working with a person who actually does marketing for my software company, who was pulled in by that very same apartment company and said, look, we're really having trouble attracting and keeping renters here because the promised infrastructure and live, work, play just never materialized. And at this point, there's no prospect that we're seeing carrying forward. The second one is to the Parkway, which to the Parkway at 1131 has occupied a lot of my time over the last several years. This was at the site of a former post office where they got approval to put up a 7-story, 85-unit building on a postage stamp size lot. The demand was so low that they came back and asked for an adjustment to that to 2 7-story towers of approximately 40 plus units. Only one was ever built. And the remaining part of the property has a construction fence around it and has for 3 years and no resolution of where it's going to go. And we understand from the residents that it took us an extremely long time for that to sell out. So the assumption that there is a demand for high rise in the community and seniors moving in there has not carried through in both cases. The other thing is that this property is going to be built on Leda clay. Leda clay caused a building which is at the other end of Tarrant, which is the atriums, a construction period of no less than 10 years because of the construction difficulties and cost overruns that happened. And this is being built on the same thing. So this is going to be an expensive property to develop. It's in a very isolated piece of property. It's effectively cut off by, very busy intersection. You couldn't cross it. There's no crosswalks for 600 meters to cross the street to the rest of the community. So these are some lessons that need to be understood, that things that may have worked in Westboro, when translated and put into a suburb such as Beaver Brook, may not work. And we don't want to see projects going ahead here that are going to be kind of marginal or not somewhere people want to live, or that include degrading the rest of the community in terms of increased intensification, privacy overlook. The developer has worked with the community to try and attenuate that, but the fact remains is that the setbacks and elevation changes are not compatible with the as-built community. It's compatible with the general urban area definition, which, we would not be the first community association to say that that's not terribly respectful of our community. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I do have Councillor Hubley has a question, I believe. Councillor Hubley?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Neil, thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask you where you got one piece of information that you mentioned there. Under your transportation piece, you say that 70% of the people in Canada work in Canada and only 7% work outside of Canada.
Yeah, I mean, that's a study that's been around for about 10 years. I can't remember exactly the site. I can certainly pull that statistic up. But that was basically analysis, and part parcel it was showing, what is the in-community transit for work across the city. It's a fairly common study which you can pull up, and the analysis of that was 70% is in community, and of the identified other destinations, only 7% were them downtown.
So it's at least 10 years old, the study you're referring to.
I would, given the extreme growth of the Canada high-tech sector, I would tend to say it's going the other way. So I don't know that I would agree with the statement that the 10-year-old study has. And in fact, the one thing that the study did show is that from 1965 to 4, 5, 6 years ago, and this is a study that is updated on a regular basis, that trend has not changed.
And I believe the BIA, when Councillor Suds was there, I thought there was a study that came out that said something like 30 or 35,000 people a day are coming to work in Canada. either from Canada or outside of Canada. I see you shaking your head, so I guess I'm remembering that number right. So part of what this proposal may be, Neil, is to not so much to accommodate people within Canada, but to get the people that are coming from outside of Canada to go to jobs in Canada, to provide them with apartments. That's the way I saw this proposal anyway.
Well, speak to that specifically. I mean, I know one of the, I mean, this property has changed 3 hands so far before, you know, I mean, it's about to change hands again with this rezoning. And one of the problems that has been floated out is with work from home so prevalent, and I'm still in the high-tech industry, right? And I can tell you that, you know, everybody's working from home and will be for the foreseeable future. And they're talking about fairly small apartments, which, you know, they're not big enough to also have a work from home station in some of them. So it's not clear that that's attractive for somebody to say move from downtown to Canada to go into a small apartment just to be closer to work. So I understand absolutely and can't disagree at all with the statement that, yeah, we're seeing increasing people coming from the rest of the city to Canada North, but that doesn't make this particular property any more attractive as a place to live.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And Neil, if you find that study, I'd really like to see it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be all means, I'd be happy to do that.
And I don't think, Mr. Thompson, that you were speaking as an expert. You were just on observations that you have from over the years, correct?
Well, what's an expert?
Well, an expert, but there actually are experts that, you know, have that. Like, for example, there are experts in transportation that regularly come to Councillor Tierney's transportation committee, or Councillor Hubley. I mean, it's I'd like to think I know a lot because I've been a councillor for 23 years, but when it comes to myself against people who are professionals, whether they're engineers, etc., of any kind, or planners, etc., I mean, it's an entirely different. Observations are not fact. So hang on a second. Councillor Suds has a question for you. Councillor Suds?
Terrific. Thank you, Chair Harder, and good morning, Neil. Thank you very much for joining us. Just a few comments. I did want to thank you, of course, for being here and for your work on this and leading up to coming to Planning Committee today. I know this file has been around with a previous zoning appeal. I think it was back in 2014, and here we are today with some additional tweaks to it. To Councillor Hubley's point, there was a study done when I was at the Business Association that had indicated 50% of folks. Now that was specific to Canada North, to be fair to Councillor Hubley. So a bit of a different analysis, but 50% were working within the community versus going elsewhere. I think just a further comment, and I can't recall who had made it, with respect to the demand type of housing. I think we're quite fortunate in Canada that we do have a variety of housing, but to the point that we do have 30,000 people working in the business park every day, and we know that they're not all from Canada North. And we also know that there is a lack of entry-level housing and affordable housing in our community. So in my mind, this is an opportunity to introduce some of that, but also introducing it in proximity to the technology park, which I do think is attractive. Having said that, and I've spoken with the new owner and those involved in this application, there are definitely some concerns as it is moving forward. And I would say, namely, with respect to the traffic impact. Now that, of course, could be mitigated as we improve transit in our community and we get stage 3 LRT out to Canada and BRT up March Road. But I think there's still some further work and discussion that needs to happen with respect to that. But that's all. And my thanks again, Neil, for being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. We're now going to, I also want to take note of correspondence we've received. I'm sure that you've all had access to it. Nico Church and Miguel Tremblay. Are you speaking together, Miguel? Yes?
Morning, Madam Chair. Miguel and I are prepared to make a full presentation. We're also happy to keep it simple and just address the comments that were raised by Mr. Thompson. So it's up to you, Madam Chair.
I think why don't we do this? Respond to the comments, and if we need more, we'll let you know.
Sounds like a plan. So with respect to the comments raised by Mr. Thompson, Councillor Suds already touched upon it a little bit. The site is located close to transit, which will be good for people who do want to work downtown. But it also is located in very close proximity to the Canada North employment node. So it does provide that flexibility to work elsewhere or to live and work in Canada. It also, as Councillor Suds has pointed out, it does increase the diversity of housing choices, whether it's for high-tech employees who are looking for their first place to live as they're starting their career, or it might be also for older adults who are looking to downsize, because right now the majority of the housing stock in Canada North largely consists of single-family dwellings, of townhouses, and so on and so forth. So this is providing a different housing option at a higher density in close proximity to transit. It's important to note as well that we're not asking for greater height here. The site has already been rezoned to provide a 9-story building height. So we're just looking for a redistribution of the massing. With respect to a few other matters that were raised by Mr. Thompson, such as transportation impact, privacy, noise, light impact, and so on and so forth, those are issues that we are confident are going to be dealt with through the site plan control process that we're still going through. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, I don't see anyone waving. Thank you. Thanks for coming out today. So committee members on the item 1131 and 1151 Tarrant Road, the zoning bylaw amendment. Is Carrie?
Carried.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. So the next item, which is in my ward, close to, but I don't think this one's including Councillor Moffat. It's sketchy all the time for who's on first and who's on second. But this is the zoning bylaw amendment, part of 3640 Greenbank Road. It's Tamarack. And we do have Vice Chair Gower has a motion to correct the zoning location map.
I do. So whereas there is a technical amendment required in the zoning to provide additional flexibility in the placement of an Ottawa Carleton District School Board school, and whereas the Ottawa Carleton District School Board made this request on October 7th, 2020, therefore be it resolved that Planning Committee recommend Council approve the following amendments to the report. That document 1, location and detailed zoning map, be replaced with the attached document. The document 2, details of recommended zoning, be amended as follows. Area A from DR to I1A01. Area B from MR to I1A01. Area C from DR to R3Z 2665. And Area D from MR to R3Z 2665. And be it further resolved that pursuant to the Planning Act subsection 3417, no further notice be given.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask Michelle Taggart. Michelle, I saw you. Can you speak to that, please, and how we got here, what's happening? Because, you know, it was late yesterday that we heard from the school board, and then overnight there was another email sent. So I think that for the committee members, it would be very helpful. And Lily, as I said, if you want to chime in after Michelle speaks, go for it. Thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of Planning Committee. Thank you.
Melody, could you put the zoning map up on the screen? Or I guess if you have it in front of you,
Let me find
the
it.
map in front of you, it could be fine. But just as a bit of background, when we originally designed this site a few years ago, we designed it as per the approved CDP, which had the school block and the park block at the far west edge of the lands, right at the edge of the urban boundary. And we received draft approval from the city and environmental compliance approval from the province with that design. Oh, sorry, can you just do the proposed zoning map, Melody? Just that's in the report, the staff report. Thank you. So city staff subsequently raised concerns over the depth of the pipes in the design because of some geotech issues. So Tamarack agreed to redesign the subdivision and raise everything up. So to do that, we had to start a new design from scratch. And when we started the new design, we were looking at the site and we decided that having the school and the park at the center of the community made much better sense from planning and design perspective, BBSS, create the best, most complete community. And so when we did the redesign, we moved them to the location that's shown on the zoning map right there. So there are sensitive marine clay soils throughout the subdivision, and the school board is concerned that their new location has sensitive marine clay soils, which would lead them to have to incur higher construction costs for a future school. And the school and the park, which you can see here, are adjacent to one another, and the soils under the south end are a little better than the soils under the north end. So that's why they're proposing dual zoning on those two blocks so that the parks people and the school people can work together for what's the best configuration for where the school is and where the park is. I don't want to redesign the entire site again, but having those two blocks interchange is fine with Tamarack, and so we support the amended or the proposed motion and the zoning as stated.
Thank you, Michelle. Lily, anything to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing to add is after Tamarack proposed the revised layout of the subdivision, staff did follow the Planning Act requirements and the council's public consultation policies to provide the notification to all members and the public to be informed of the revision, and including the school board. At that time, the school board didn't raise any concerns. So that's how the zoning is proceeding until yesterday we were made aware of the concern from the school. That's why the motion is created.
Well, and I appreciate how much effort and money that Tamarack has put into this extension of the community that they've been building here for a number of years now. It's just unfortunate, really, that we didn't get that information ahead of time because, you know, now we have questions. Councillor Leeper, question, and then Councillor Hubley.
Sorry about that. Thanks. Just to make sure I understand this, it doesn't seem like a big deal. You've got area A, D, and C that represents a certain space. There's going to be a school in there plus open space. And all this is doing is giving you the flexibility to configure that however you wish within that existing block.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And along the same lines, so if I understand this correctly, you're moving the school from a corner to more central location within the whole project?
Yes, Madam Chair and Councillor. Yes, so that was the result of the revision to the subdivision.
Right, which was a result of the reports coming back saying that they needed to make a change and add the fill and so on to that property, correct?
Just to clarify, this report is a zoning, and the motion was just to add a dual zone for both the school block and the park block. The changes to the subdivision plan was already done.
Already, okay, thank you. And do we know if the school board intends to build there? Have they singled they're going to build, or is this land there that they're going to put up for sale?
Under the Planning Act, the subdivision landowner can hold up the block for the school for 7 years. So then after 7 years, if the school doesn't take the land, the landowner has the right to use the property for other purposes, such as residential. For this case, we're not aware that the school ever indicated they absolutely will or they absolutely will not, but the understanding is they intend to put a school here. This was consistent with the original CDP for the whole area.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers, Lily. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Okay, anyone else have any questions? Okay, so on the motion to correct the zoning location map, is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. And on the item as amended, carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for the, and thanks, Michelle, for your late intervention and your support, Lily.
Thank you.
Okay, what do we get next? Okay, so now, I think that's it for our main stuff. We've got the 2 items on the agenda and other business. So I'm just going to move the other business up ahead of the notices of motion for a subsequent meeting. First of all, we'll deal with the technical motion staff initiated to add an item to the agenda so that staff can enact the bylaws for infill in R4 in a concise way ahead of the October 14th council meeting. David, you're there, David Weiss? Did you want to say anything, David, succinctly?
Madam Chair, sorry, let me turn on my video. Madam Chair, the reason for this technical motion is really quite straightforward. It's simply to make sure, because these infill bylaws are quite complicated, and both of them were developed concurrently. We need to make sure that there's an appropriate process by which these are implemented. And this is just simply to provide some transparency, some clarity, but also to make sure that that our staff and everyone knows exactly what order they need to happen in. The reason for that, again, is because infill was meant to come ahead of R4, but both of them are coming concurrently. So there's certainly a degree of interchange that we need to account for.
Okay, thank you very much. So on the motion?
Sorry, point of order. I still have not actually seen any resolution in the motion. Can that be scrolled up?
Do you want me to read this, Madam Chair, for the record?
Could that be circulated, please, as quickly as possible?
Was it not?
No, we will do so now.
Chair, this is a lot of clauses and sections.
Let's hang on to it. You have a look at that. We'll go on to the, well, to the next briefing on the bill. Let's see, what's the motion? Bill 197, the Economic Recovery Act. We have an update on that. How about that? Does that work for you, Councillor Leeper?
Yeah, thanks. If we could just do
okay, and so
reverse the order of these. Thanks.
Sure. And then, so we're just going to park that one for a minute, okay? We'll just like, Garrett, you're here to speak to 197.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
And so, David, be ready for some questions that Councillor Leeper will likely have. Yeah, well, you know it inside out, so I'm sure you're going to notice something that's okay. Go ahead, Garrett.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. This presentation, as you said, is with respect to Bill 197, which is titled the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act. It's a large bill that has a lot of aspects, but I'm just talking about the planning and development charges aspects today. This is the same presentation that was given to ARAC for those members that were also on that committee. If I could go to the next slide, please. So this legislation was enacted in July of 2020 and came into force on September 18, 2020. You'll recall that a staff report was prepared when the legislation came out, but this briefing is to update you on the regulations and the coming into force of the entire act, which happened on that date, September 18, 2020. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is just a timeline of the legislative amendments that have taken place. You'll recall that Bill 108 came into effect in June of 2019, and we have had a lot of legislation coming from the province since then. Bill 197 effectively is the culmination of the process that was started under Bill 108. So at least with respect to development charges and planning, the majority of those changes are now in effect, and we can now speak to how the transition will take place. Next slide, please. So you'll recall that Section 37, heightened density bonusing, has been replaced under initially under Bill 108, and that's retained under Bill 197. That's been replaced with a community benefits charge, which we'll address in the next slide. Section 37 bylaws are going to remain in force unless and until we enact a community benefits charge bylaw. And my understanding is that staff are looking at enacting or bringing forward a report about enacting such a bylaw, but that's still in the process of being studied. Next slide, please. The community benefits charge power under Section 37, the new Section 37, is retained. However, it's been narrowed considerably. Community benefits charges can be charged, but it will now only apply to relatively high, medium to high density residential development. Specifically, that's development of a building with 10 or more residential units and 5 or more stories, both of those things. Additionally, there's a cap on the amount of community benefits charges we can collect from any one property, and that's 4% of the property value. And that's the total community benefits charge is 4%. Services that can be charged as community benefits charges are very broadly defined, similar to how the Development Charges Act used to be drafted. The community benefits charge can be charged for any facility or service related to an increased demand from new development. And it's only with respect to capital charges for that facility or service. So there's very few to no limitations on what we can charge for community benefits charges. The one main limitation, though, is we can't double count. We can't double collect community charges with development charges. We have to enact a community benefits charge strategy, which is similar to a development charge background study. The regulation is out and it has similar requirements, but less specific. Next slide, please. Development charges are following the same approach that was approved under Bill 108, but they've now been expanded a bit. The development charges used to be collected on the basis of a general power to collect development charges. There were some restrictions on what we could collect. Now there's just a list of what we can collect in terms of services that are eligible. If we could go to the next slide, I'll show you the list of services that are eligible under development charges under Bill 197. So this is now in force. We're able to collect development charges for anything on this list. The bolded items on this list are items that were not included under the original Bill 108, but have now been added under Bill 197. So you can see that about half of the items are newly added under Bill 197 or some of the subsequent amendments that came before Bill 197. The list is fairly comprehensive. You'll note that I haven't really been able to identify anything in our current development charge bylaw that's not covered by this list, which is good for us. If you go to the next slide, please. In terms of transition between development charge bylaws, the old and the new regime, these are now in effect, but our development charge bylaw will continue to remain in force until 2 years from the date of September 18th, 2020. At that time, anything that wouldn't have been collectible that in our current bylaw that's not collectible under the new regime is not enforceable. But again, I don't think there's much that wouldn't be enforceable under our current bylaw because the list is quite broad. Next slide, please. One of the main changes under Bill 197 is that it reverses the approach proposed under Bill 108 with respect to parkland. We can continue to collect for dedication of parkland under our parkland bylaw. Bill 197 does continue to allow us to use what's referred to as the alternative rate for calculating the amount of parkland due. The standard rate is based on a percentage of the land area. The alternative rate is based on the number of residential units being developed. So 1 hectare per 300 units is the maximum we can charge. Our bylaw uses that alternative rate, and accordingly, we will need to reenact our bylaw by September 18, 2022 to continue to use that alternative rate, the 1 hectare per 300 units. At that time, the bylaw will be subject to appeal by any person who has an objection to the rate we're imposing. That's new. Currently, parkland bylaws weren't previously subject to appeal. Finally, ministers section 47 orders. Section 47 allows the minister of the province to issue a order with respect to subdivision or site plan zoning bylaw approval. That's been expanded to allow for site plan approval orders. So it just allows the minister more fine-grained control if they want to intervene in municipal decision-making with respect to planning. We haven't seen that to be the case too much in Ottawa, although we have seen in the last year that there have been more minister's orders issued in the GTA area. So it remains to be seen whether this will be something that we'll be seeing in Ottawa as well. So I went through that fairly quickly. I'm happy to answer any further questions anyone might have about the legislation under Bill 197 or any of the previous legislation. Thanks.
I just noted that the date for the parkland that council has to confirm of September 18th or something, 2022, it'll have to be at the end of June because it's an election year. And we won't be voting on any of that. So make sure you take note for work plan and that sort of thing. Councillor Leeper has a question. Councillor Leeper?
Thanks. I just want to understand the relationship between the cash in lieu and the community benefit charge, where the community benefit charge is only going to apply to higher density. We're seeing a fair bit of CIL coming in the ward as a result of the semi-detached that are going in. Will that continue to be the case, or is CIL now only applicable to higher density as well?
So we can continue to collect cash in lieu under our parkland bylaw. We could keep the current system as is. We're not required to enact a community benefits charge bylaw. Unlike development charges, where we're explicitly prohibited from collecting development charges for parkland acquisition, community benefits charges aren't limited. So we could theoretically collect, instead of collecting a parkland cash in lieu or dedication, we could collect parkland through our community benefits charge. And again, it's only applying to those higher density residential. That's an option. I'm not sure if that's one that we're looking at doing, but it is theoretically possible. This community benefits charge is a really flexible tool, it appears.
Okay, but we still have the option to continue to collect CIL through a parkland bylaw.
Correct, yeah, and that was a change that was enacted under Bill 197. So
yeah, perfect. All right, what are the next steps for the team? What questions are you asking, and what decisions do you want to have to make before the end of the term of council?
So I'm not entirely plugged into the discussion. Others may be able to, on the call, may be able to answer more in depth, but my understanding is the city is looking at bringing forward recommendations to council about what would be best for the city to include in the community benefits charge. And that's at a fairly early stage because the province did advance the enactment of the regulation and the coming into force of the legislation fairly quickly. So without too much warning. So we're still at a fairly early stage in assessing what would be beneficial.
Okay. Mr. Mark?
I see, yeah.
Chair, I was advised by the general manager yesterday that he's hoping to bring forward a report late this year with respect to the process for the establishment of a community benefits charge bylaw.
Okay. Okay, Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else waving. So on that, yeah, thank you very much, Garrett. And anyone who wants to have another look and ask more questions, that short presentation will be available to us.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we'll go back now to the motion on infill, the technical motion on infill that is not very substantive. And I know that Councillor Leeper had a look at it and you are comfortable with it now, correct?
I am, Chair. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and no one else does. So on the motion that will help us at council next week, infill in R4, on the motion that was moved by Vice Chair Gower, is that item carried? Carried? Thank you. You know what? Before we sign out, I just want to do a quick quorum check, just see who's here, because I have not done that. So let's see. And then I have something exciting to tell you. Councillor Dudas.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
It keeps moving. Councillor Tierney.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
See?
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Brockington.
Here.
And myself. I think that's, did I get you? I got Councillor Hubley. Yeah, that's everyone. Okay, thank you, everyone. So here's the good news. You're gonna like it. Guess what? We are not having a meeting on October 22nd.
That's the
So
bad news.
that's the good news. No, it is because we've had some changes to the legislative agenda that quite a large project has been pushed off. It's not quite ready for daytime TV. So it's, and it was a very smallish kind of agenda, small for us. So there's nothing that's pressing that can't be put off until the next meeting, which isn't until Tuesday, November the 10th. It's like summer holidays or something for planning.
That could be the budget meeting, Madam Chair?
The 26th of November.
Oh,
is your
okay,
budget.
so the meeting. Okay.
So, and the reason we're meeting on the Tuesday, November the 10th is because council's going to meet on our usual day of Thursday, November 12th, because of Remembrance Day on November the 11th, obviously. Okay, so we move planning to the Tuesday, November 10th. So that's the other news. Anyone have any notices of motion for subsequent meetings? I think that's it. Yeah, nothing else? Good. Okay, so we're adjourned until November the 10th. Can't
Thank
say
you.
that often enough. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.